Ada. Harper tightened the straps of her bag as she stepped onto the bustling streets of Boston. The city hummed with its usual energy, cars honking, pedestrians weaving through crosswalks, and the faint aroma of coffee wafting from corner cafes. For Ada, it was more than just another morning. It was the morning. Her final exam loomed just hours away, a decisive moment that could either propel her into the internship at Reed & Associates or leave her dreams of a law career uncertain. She couldn't afford to falter, not after everything her parents had sacrificed to get her here. As she walked briskly down Tremont Street, her thoughts were laser-focused on the upcoming test. She mentally rehearsed case precedents and legal principles, her lips mouthing arguments she had memorized over countless late nights. The weight of expectation hung heavy, but Ada was no stranger to pressure. She had been juggling academics, part-time jobs, and volunteer work for years, balancing it all with a determination that left little room for error. The chill of the early spring morning stung her cheeks as she approached the subway station. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Mia Thompson, her best friend and roommate. "Big day, Harper. You got this." Mia's voice came through the line, warm and teasing. "Just remember, if you ace this, drinks are on you tonight." Ada chuckled softly. "I'll hold you to that," she replied, though her heart was too preoccupied to fully engage in the banter. After a few more words of encouragement, she hung up and descended the stairs to the subway platform. The train screeched to a halt, and Ada found a seat near the doors. She pulled out her notebook, flipping through pages of carefully annotated legal theories. But as she read, her gaze occasionally drifted to the other passengers, a habit she'd picked up over the years. She liked observing people, piecing together fragments of their lives from their expressions, their gestures, the way they dressed or sat. Her attention was drawn to an elderly woman a few seats away. The woman clutched her handbag tightly, her frail frame wrapped in a tattered coat that looked ill-suited for the morning chill. She stared vacantly at the floor, her hands trembling slightly with each jolt of the train. Ada hesitated, unsure if it was her place to intervene. The woman didn't seem to notice her gaze, but something about her vulnerability pulled at Ada. Before she could decide whether to act, the train lurched to a stop at the next station. The woman stood abruptly, gripping a metal pole for balance, but her movements were unsteady. Ada's heart leapt as she watched the woman sway, her feet unsteady on the platform. Then, without warning, the woman crumpled to the ground just outside the subway doors. Gasps rippled through the car, and Ada instinctively bolted to her feet. Ada rushed out of the subway car, her bag bouncing against her hip as she squeezed past startled passengers. The platform buzzed with murmurs, but no one else seemed to move. Kneeling beside the woman, Ada gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her voice trembled, betraying her growing panic. The woman's eyes fluttered open briefly, unfocused and glazed. Her skin was pale, her breaths shallow. Ada's mind raced. She fumbled for her phone, ready to call for help, only to realize she had left it buried deep in her bag, or worse, at home. A wave of frustration and fear washed over her, but she forced herself to focus. "Someone get help!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the hum of the platform. Heads turned, but most of the crowd remained rooted, their expressions a mix of concern and hesitation. A man's voice broke through the noise. "Here, let me help." Ada turned to see a tall, composed man in his 40s stepping toward her. His neatly tailored suit and confident demeanor stood out against the chaotic backdrop of the subway. Without hesitation, he crouched down, checking the woman's pulse with a practiced motion. "She needs a hospital," he said firmly, his gaze meeting Ada's. "Do you know if she has any medical conditions?" Ada shook her head. "I just saw her collapse. I don't know her." The man nodded, rising to his feet. My car is just outside. Can you help me get her there? Yes, Ada replied without a second thought. Together, they carefully lifted the woman, her weight surprisingly light, and guided her up the stairs to street level. The crisp air hit Ada's face as they emerged, her heart pounding, not just from the effort, but from the gravity of the situation. The man led her to a sleek black sedan parked at the curb. He opened the back door, and Ada helped the woman settle in before climbing into the passenger seat herself. The man slid behind the wheel, his movements efficient but calm. "Hold her steady," he instructed as he started the engine. Ada adjusted the woman's position, her hand lightly supporting the frail figure. The car sped through the morning traffic, weaving expertly between lanes. Ada stole a glance at the man. His jaw was set, his hands steady on the wheel. She couldn't help but wonder who he was, someone so composed, so decisive in a moment of crisis. But there was no time for questions. Her mind was consumed with worry for the woman in the back seat. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. The man glanced at her briefly, a hint of a smile breaking through his serious expression. "You did the right thing, stopping to help her. Not everyone would." Ada looked down, her thoughts briefly flashing to the exam she was about to miss, but as she glanced back at the elderly woman, who now seemed to be breathing a bit more evenly, she knew there was no room for regret. The decision had already been made. The hospital loomed ahead, its red emergency sign a beacon against the grey sky. As they pulled into the entrance, Ada felt a mix of relief and apprehension. This was only the beginning. What would happen next? For the woman, for her exam, for the day she thought would go exactly as planned, was a mystery she wasn't ready to confront just yet. Ada followed the man's lead as they entered the bustling emergency room. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air, mingling with the sounds of hurried footsteps, distant voices, and the occasional wail of a patient in pain. Nurses and doctors moved with purpose, their faces focused but calm amidst the chaos. The man flagged down a nurse, quickly explaining what had happened, while Ada supported the elderly woman who was barely conscious. Within moments, a team of medical staff arrived with a wheelchair. Ada gently helped the woman into it, her heart sinking as she watched the woman's frail body slump forward. A nurse reassured her, "We'll take it from here. Thank you for bringing her in." Ada hesitated, unsure whether to stay or leave. Her thoughts swirled. She had done her part, but something told her she couldn't walk away just yet. The man must have sensed her uncertainty, because he turned to her with a calm expression. "Let's wait," he said. "It's best to make sure she's stable." Ada nodded, grateful for his steadiness. They sat down in the corner of the waiting area, where the fluorescent lights cast a pale glow over rows of plastic chairs. Ada's nerves were still raw from the adrenaline, and she rubbed her hands together absently, trying to regain her composure. "Are you okay?" the man asked, his voice low but firm. "I think so," she said, though the words felt hollow. I couldn't leave her there. She looked so helpless." The man studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You did the right thing. Most people wouldn't have stopped. That says a lot about you." Ada felt a flush creep up her cheeks, but didn't respond. Instead, she leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees as her thoughts drifted to her exam. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was already past the time the test had started. Her stomach twisted with guilt and dread. This exam wasn't just any test. It was her ticket to the internship at Reed and Associates, the first step toward her dream of becoming a lawyer. And now, it felt like all of it was slipping away. "Is something wrong?" the man asked, his tone concerned. Ada hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing I can change now," she said quietly. He didn't press further, respecting her silence. Instead, he extended a hand. "I'm Carson, by the way. Carson Reed." Ada froze for a fraction of a second, her eyes widening slightly as she processed the name. Reed, as in Reed and Associates? She had read about him. His name was on the firm's website, plastered across profiles in legal journals. This was the man whose company she had dreamed of working for. But there was no time to dwell on the connection. The sound of hurried footsteps interrupted her thoughts as a nurse approached. "She's stable," the nurse said. "Dehydration and low blood sugar. We've admitted her for observation, but she'll be fine." Relief washed over Ada, and she exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Ada let the nurse's words sink in, the relief lifting a weight she hadn't realized was pressing on her chest. She exchanged a quick glance with Carson, who nodded, his expression softening for the first time since they'd arrived. The nurse continued, "If you'd like, you can stay for a while. She might appreciate seeing a familiar face when she fully wakes up." Ada hesitated. She wasn't family. She barely knew the woman. But something about the way Luna had looked at her earlier, the fleeting gratitude in her weak smile, made Ada feel tethered to her. She nodded, glancing back at Carson, as if silently asking for guidance. "I'll stay," she said softly. "Good choice," Carson replied. His tone carried an approval that Ada found oddly reassuring. The two of them returned to the waiting area, settling back into the uncomfortable plastic chairs. A silence hung between them, but it wasn't entirely awkward. Ada could feel Carson's presence, steady and grounding, as if he were deliberately giving her space to process everything. Her thoughts, however, were anything but steady. The exam, her future, still loomed over her, a constant whisper at the back of her mind. She tried to focus on the good she'd done, but doubt clawed at her resolve. Had she made the right decision? Would her professors understand? Would Reed and Associates even consider her application after this? She clenched her fists, a wave of frustration washing over her. "You're worried about something," Carson said, breaking the silence. Ada glanced at him, startled by his perception. His calm, piercing eyes met hers, encouraging her to speak. "I was supposed to be taking my final exam right now," she admitted, her voice low. It's the most important one of my career so far." Carson didn't immediately respond. He leaned back slightly, crossing his arms as if weighing her words. "And yet, here you are," he said, finally. "Most people would have walked away. You didn't. That's not a small thing." Ada's cheeks burned at the compliment, but she couldn't find it in herself to feel proud. "But what if it costs me everything I've worked for?" "Maybe," Carson said, his tone even. "But if you walked away, would you still feel like you earned it?" Ada blinked, caught off guard by the question. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Instead, she looked down, her hands tightening in her lap. Before she could reply, a soft voice interrupted them. "Excuse me." Ada looked up to see Claire Jenkins, a young woman with sharp eyes and a tight expression, standing nearby. Her resemblance to Luna was striking, though Claire's demeanor carried an edge of skepticism. "You're the ones who brought my aunt here?" Claire asked, her tone more curt than Ada expected. "Yes," Carson said smoothly, standing to address her. She collapsed at the subway station. Ada here saw her and called for help. Claire's gaze shifted to Ada, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I appreciate that," she said slowly, though her words lacked warmth. "But why did you get involved?" Ada stiffened under the scrutiny, unsure how to respond. She hadn't expected gratitude, but Claire's suspicion felt almost accusatory. "I couldn't just leave her there," Ada said, her voice steady but calm. "She needed help." Claire studied her for a moment longer before nodding slightly. "Thank you," she said, her tone softening just a fraction. "I'll take it from here." Ada watched as Claire walked away, disappearing into the hallway leading to Luna's room. She felt a pang of unease, unsure if she'd done enough or if Claire's guarded demeanor was just a defense mechanism. "She's protective," Carson said, as if reading her thoughts. "Give her time." Ada nodded but said nothing. The encounter left her unsettled, but before she could dwell on it, Carson reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek business card. "Here," he said, handing it to her, "in case you need anything." Ada hesitated as she took it, her eyes scanning the embossed letters, Carson Reed, CEO, Reed and Associates. Her breath hitched. This wasn't just any connection. This was the connection. The very person she'd dreamed of impressing was sitting beside her, handing her a lifeline she hadn't even asked for. She looked up at him, her words catching in her throat. "Thank you," she managed finally. Carson offered a small smile, standing and adjusting his jacket. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Ada. Trust that. And don't let today make you doubt your instincts. They'll take you far." With that, he gave her a curt nod and walked away, leaving Ada alone in the waiting room. She looked down at the card in her hand, its weight feeling heavier than it should. Her future had just taken a turn she couldn't have anticipated, and as the clock ticked on, she couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. Ada lingered in the waiting room long after Carson had left. The card in her hand felt like both a promise and a weight, its embossed letters reflecting faintly under the fluorescent lights. She stared at it for a moment longer before slipping it into her bag, her mind swirling with questions she wasn't ready to answer. For now she had more immediate concerns. Luna was stable, but something about Claire's guarded attitude left Ada uneasy. Standing, she stretched her stiff legs and decided to check on Luna. After a brief exchange with the nurse at the desk, she was directed to room 214. The corridor was quieter than the chaotic waiting area, and Ada could hear the faint beeping of monitors as she approached the room. Peeking through the slightly ajar door, she saw Luna resting peacefully, her frail figure dwarfed by the hospital bed. Claire sat by her bedside, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. Ada hesitated, unsure if her presence would be welcome. Before she could decide, Claire looked up and caught her in the doorway. "You can come in," Claire said, her tone neutral but not unkind. Ada stepped inside, her footsteps soft against the tiled floor. "I just wanted to check on her," she said, her voice low. "Is she doing better?" Claire nodded, her gaze briefly flickering to Luna. "The doctor said she'll recover. She was severely dehydrated and hasn't been eating properly. They're keeping her for observation." Relief washed over Ada, and she smiled faintly. "That's good to hear." For a moment the room was silent, save for the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. Ada shifted on her feet, feeling the weight of Claire's scrutiny once again. "I wanted to thank you," Claire said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her words were hesitant, as if they didn't come easily. "What you did for her. Not everyone would have gone to that trouble." "It wasn't trouble," Ada replied quickly. "She needed help." Claire studied her, her expression softening slightly. "You're a law student, right? Carson mentioned it." Ada blinked, surprised. She hadn't realized Carson had spoken about her. "Yes," she said. "I was actually on my way to a final exam when I saw her." "And you missed it to help her?" Claire's eyebrows lifted slightly, her tone carrying a note of incredulity. Ada nodded. "It didn't feel like a choice at the time." Claire tilted her head as if re-evaluating her initial impression. Most people wouldn't have made the same decision. Ada offered a small, self-deprecating shrug. "Maybe, but it felt like the right thing to do." Claire's lips quirked in what could almost be a smile. Well, for what it's worth, I'm glad you were there. Before Ada could respond, Luna stirred in the bed, her eyes fluttering open. Both women leaned closer, their attention snapping to the elderly woman as she blinked groggily at her surroundings. "Claire?" Luna murmured, her voice weak but clear. "I'm here, Aunt Luna," Claire said softly, taking her hand. Luna's gaze shifted to Ada, a faint smile spreading across her face. "And you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're the one who helped me." Ada nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "I'm glad you're feeling better." Luna's smile deepened, her grip on Claire's hand tightening. "Thank you," she said, her words weighted with gratitude. Ada opened her mouth to reply, but the sound of footsteps approaching the room drew her attention. She turned to see a doctor stepping inside, clipboard in hand. "Good evening," he said, nodding at the three women. "I'd like to go over some details regarding Luna's care." Ada took that as her cue to step back. "I'll let you talk," she said, offering Luna and Claire a small smile before quietly exiting the room. Once back in the corridor, Ada leaned against the wall, letting out a shaky breath. Today had been a whirlwind, and the enormity of everything was beginning to catch up with her. As much as she wanted to dwell on what she might have lost, her exam, her carefully laid out plans, she couldn't shake the feeling that being here, in this moment, was exactly where she was supposed to be. She hadn't expected to cross paths with people like Carson or Luna today, let alone leave such an impression. The thought brought a flicker of hope to the edges of her weariness. Maybe, just maybe, the detour her life had taken wasn't entirely a setback. As Ada stood in the quiet corridor, lost in her thoughts, Claire emerged from Luna's room. The sharpness in her demeanor had softened, replaced by something more contemplative. She paused when she saw Ada, as if debating whether to speak, then walked over. "She's asking about you," Claire said, her tone warmer now. "She doesn't usually warm up to strangers this quickly." Ada smiled faintly, unsure how to respond. "I'm just glad I was there to help." Claire crossed her arms, leaning lightly against the wall. "You know, she's always been independent, almost to a fault. She'd never ask for help, even if she needed it. I'm sure this isn't easy for her." Ada nodded, sensing the weight behind Claire's words. "I get that. My parents are the same way. I guess I learned to keep an eye out for people who might not say it but need help anyway." Claire tilted her head slightly, as if seeing Ada in a new light. "You're different, you know that?" Ada's brow furrowed. "Different? How?" "Most people would have just kept walking," Claire said simply. "And even if they stopped, they wouldn't have gone this far. You missed your exam for someone you didn't even know. That's not normal." Ada chuckled softly, though her voice held a hint of self-consciousness. "I don't know if that's a compliment or a warning." Claire smirked, a small glimmer of amusement breaking through her guarded exterior. "A compliment," she admitted, "though it does make you a bit of a mystery." Ada was about to respond when the doctor stepped out of Luna's room, signaling for Claire. "She's doing well, but we'll keep her overnight for observation," he explained. "You're welcome to stay if you'd like." Claire nodded and turned to Ada. "I'll stay with her, but if you're not in a rush, maybe you could come by tomorrow. She seems to like having you around." Ada hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately. There was something about Luna that felt grounding, even in the chaos of the day. But the weight of her own life pulled at her, the exam she'd missed, the uncertainty of what came next. "I'll try," she said finally. "If she needs anything tonight, let me know." Claire gave a small nod of acknowledgement. "Thanks, Ada, for everything." As Claire returned to Luna's room, Ada made her way back to the waiting area. The hustle of the hospital had died down. the hum of conversation reduced to sporadic whispers and the occasional announcement over the intercom. She pulled out Carson's card, running her thumb over the embossed letters. Reed and Associates. The name held so much weight in her mind, a symbol of everything she had worked for, sacrificed for. And now, through a twist of fate, she had met the man behind it all. The encounter felt surreal, as though the universe had decided to take her meticulously planned path and turn it upside down. She slipped the card back into her bag and walked out of the hospital into the crisp night air. The streets were quieter now, the bustle of the day replaced by the soft hum of distant traffic and the occasional bark of a dog. Ada pulled her coat tighter around herself, her mind replaying the events of the day. As she turned the corner toward her apartment, she felt a renewed sense of resolve. The missed exam, the uncertainty. It all still weighed on her, but it didn't feel as paralyzing anymore. Carson's words echoed in her mind. Trust your instincts. They'll take you far. Ada didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. She had acted on instinct today, and it had brought her to people and moments she could never have anticipated. That, she decided, was something worth holding on to. Ada sat at the small kitchen table in her apartment, staring blankly at the cold cup of coffee in front of her. The events of the previous day felt like a blur, a strange mix of adrenaline and exhaustion that hadn't quite settled in her mind. The hospital visit, Carson Reed's unexpected presence, and Luna's frail smile, all of it kept replaying, mingling with the gnawing regret of missing her exam. Mia bustled around the kitchen, her energy a stark contrast to Ada's subdued state. "You've been quiet all morning," Mia said, glancing over her shoulder. "I get that yesterday was intense, but you've got to talk about it at some point. Keeping it bottled up isn't going to help." Ada sighed, finally taking a sip of her lukewarm coffee. "What's there to talk about?" "I missed my exam, Mia. The exam. That wasn't just another test. It was everything." Mia pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, her expression softening. "I get that. But you did something incredible yesterday. You helped someone. That counts for something." "But does it count enough?" Ada shot back, frustration creeping into her tone. "I've spent years working for this, and now it feels like it's all slipping away. What if it's too late? What if Reed and Associates won't even consider me anymore?" Mia leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "Look, I'm not going to pretend I know how those big-shot law firms think. But Carson Reed gave you his card, right? That's not nothing, Ada. He saw something in you." Ada frowned, pulling the card from her bag and placing it on the table. The embossed letters shimmered faintly under the morning light, but they felt heavier than ever. "It's just a card," she murmured. "It doesn't guarantee anything." Mia reached out and tapped the card with her finger. "Maybe not, but it's a start. And if you're too busy feeling sorry for yourself to see that, then you're missing the point. You've got a chance, Ada. Take it." Ada stared at her friend, the words sinking in slowly. She wanted to believe Mia was right, that this wasn't the end of the road, but a detour that could lead somewhere unexpected. But the uncertainty gnawed at her, and the thought of reaching out to Carson felt both daunting and presumptuous. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up, her heart skipping a beat, when she saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. "Hello?" she said cautiously, holding her breath. "Ms. Harper?" The voice on the other end was calm and professional. "This is Dr. Greer from Boston University. I've just received a call from Mr. Carson Reed regarding your situation." Ada's heart raced. "Yes, sir. Thank you for calling." "I understand you missed your exam yesterday due to extenuating circumstances," Dr. Greer continued. "After speaking with Mr. Reed, we've decided to offer you a make-up exam. It's an exception we don't grant lightly, but your circumstances were unique. For a moment, Ada was speechless. Relief and disbelief collided, making her head spin. "Thank you, Dr. Greer," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I won't waste this opportunity." "I expect not," Dr. Greer replied, his tone firm but not unkind. "You'll receive an email shortly with the details. Best of luck." When the call ended, Ada placed the phone back on the table, her hand trembling slightly. She looked at Mia, who was already grinning. "I told you," Mia said smugly. "Carson Reed doesn't just hand out cards for fun." Ada let out a shaky laugh, a glimmer of hope breaking through her doubts. For the first time since yesterday, she felt like the ground beneath her was steadying, even if only a little. Ada leaned back in her chair, the weight of the past 24 hours starting to lift. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel a spark of optimism. The makeup exam was more than a second chance. It was a lifeline, a way to prove to herself and others that she hadn't let her hard work go to waste. Mia, clearly thrilled by the news, jumped up from her seat. "This calls for a celebration," she declared, heading toward the cupboard to grab a bag of cookies. "I know it's not the fancy champagne we deserve, but hey, it's something." Ada laughed, the sound lighter than it had been all morning. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I still have to pass the exam." Mia turned around, holding the cookies aloft like a trophy. "And you will. You've been prepping for this for weeks. Besides, you've got a great story to tell now. Imagine walking into Reed and Associates and saying, 'Oh, Carson Reed, yeah, we're basically besties now.'" Ada rolled her eyes, but the thought did bring a faint smile to her face. She picked up the card again, turning it over in her hands. "I still can't believe he went out of his way to call the university. He didn't have to do that." "Exactly," Mia said, tearing open the bag of cookies and plopping back into her seat. "He sees potential in you, and you should see it in yourself too." Ada nodded slowly, letting Mia's words sink in. She had spent so much time worrying about what she might have lost that she hadn't fully appreciated what she had gained. Carson's actions were more than a kind gesture. They were a vote of confidence, a reminder that sometimes the right decision wasn't the easy one. As the afternoon stretched on, Ada's focus shifted back to her exam. She pulled out her notes and textbooks, spreading them across the table in a familiar ritual. The weight of the material no longer felt as daunting as it had before. Instead, it felt like an opportunity waiting to be seized. Hours passed as she dove back into her studies, her mind sharp and determined. Mia left her to it, understanding the importance of giving Ada space to concentrate. By evening, Ada felt a newfound clarity, not just about the material, but about the path she was on. The detour she'd taken had been unexpected, but it had given her a perspective she hadn't had before. As she packed up her notes for the night, Ada's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Claire. "Thank you again for what you did for Aunt Luna. She's been asking about you. If you're free tomorrow, we'd love for you to visit." Ada stared at the message, her thoughts momentarily scattered. Luna. Claire. The entire encounter that had upended her plans and yet somehow led her here. She typed out a quick reply, agreeing to stop by, before setting her phone aside. Tomorrow, she thought, would be another step forward, both for her and for the connections she was beginning to build. It was strange to think how one decision, one act of instinct, could ripple out and change so much. But now, for the first time, she was ready to embrace it. Ada arrived at the hospital the next morning, a small bouquet of flowers in hand. She had debated whether to bring anything, ultimately deciding that a thoughtful gesture might brighten Luna's day. As she walked through the familiar corridors, the quiet hum of the hospital brought back flashes of yesterday's whirlwind, Carson's calm presence, Claire's guarded skepticism, and Luna's frail smile. When she reached Luna's room, the door was slightly ajar. Peeking inside, Ada saw Luna sitting up in bed, her pale face looking more vibrant than before. Claire sat beside her, typing on her phone, but looked up as Ada knocked softly on the doorframe. "You're back," Claire said, her tone a mix of surprise and gratitude. She stood, stepping aside as Ada entered. "She's been asking about you all morning." "I just wanted to check in," Ada said, setting the flowers on the bedside table. "And I thought these might add a little cheer." Luna's eyes lit up as she reached for Ada's hand. "You didn't have to do that, dear," she said, her voice soft but steady. "It's more than enough that you came." "It's the least I could do," Ada replied, pulling up a chair beside the bed. "How are you feeling today?" "Much better, thanks to you," Luna said. Her gaze shifted to Claire for a moment, then back to Ada. "Claire told me you missed something important because of me. Was it a test?" Ada hesitated, unsure how much Claire had shared. "It was an exam," she admitted, her voice even. "But it's okay. I'm getting another chance." Luna frowned slightly, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. "I hate to think I caused you any trouble." "You didn't," Ada said quickly. "You needed help, and I was in the right place at the right time. Besides, everything worked out." Luna studied her for a moment, her expression softening. "Not everyone would make that choice," she said quietly. "You remind me of someone I used to know." Before Ada could respond, Claire interjected, her tone lighter. "You mean Carson, don't you?" Ada blinked in surprise, glancing between them. "Carson Reed?" Luna nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "I taught him years ago, back when he was just a boy. He was always so determined, always looking out for others. But he had a tough time growing up. His family struggled, and there were moments when I wasn't sure he'd make it." Ada felt a wave of surprise and curiosity. "You were his teacher?" "Yes," Luna said, her smile widening slightly. "He was one of the brightest students I ever had, but also one of the most vulnerable. I helped him through some hard times, and now—" She gestured vaguely, as if the rest didn't need saying. "He's never forgotten you," Claire added. "When he heard what happened, he didn't hesitate to step in. That's the kind of person he is." Ada sat back, absorbing the revelation. Carson's kindness suddenly made more sense, his actions carrying a depth she hadn't fully grasped before. He hadn't just helped her because it was the right thing to do. He understood the value of being helped, of someone stepping in when it mattered most. For a moment, the room was silent, filled only with the soft beeping of Luna's heart monitor. Then Luna reached for Ada's hand again, her grip surprisingly firm. "Whatever you do next," Luna said, her voice steady, "never lose that part of you, the part that stops and helps when no one else will. It'll take you far, more than any exam ever could." Ada nodded, her chest tightening with emotion. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means a lot." Claire smiled faintly, her usual guarded demeanor giving way to something warmer. "She's right, you know, and it looks like Carson thinks the same." Ada chuckled, the weight of yesterday feeling lighter now. She didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time in days, she felt like she was on the right path. The conversation turned lighter as Luna shared more stories about her years as a teacher. Ada listened intently, enchanted by the way Luna's eyes lit up when she spoke of her former students. Claire, too, seemed to relax, occasionally chiming in with her own childhood memories of Luna's unwavering dedication to those she taught. For the first time since meeting Claire, Ada saw a softer, more open side of her, one that revealed just how deeply she cared for her aunt. After some time, a nurse came in to check on Luna, reminding everyone to let her rest. Luna smiled at Ada as she stood to leave, her expression a mix of gratitude and warmth. "I'm glad we met, Ada," Luna said softly. "Don't be a stranger." "I won't," Ada promised, squeezing Luna's hand gently before stepping into the hallway. Claire followed her out, stopping just outside the room. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. "I know you didn't have to, but it means a lot to her. And to me." "It was no trouble," Ada replied. "She's an incredible person." Claire nodded, her usual sharpness softened. "She is. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry if I seemed guarded yesterday. I guess I've just gotten used to keeping people at arm's length." Ada offered a small smile. "I get it. Protecting the people you care about isn't easy." Claire returned the smile, a flicker of respect in her eyes. "Well, you're welcome here any time, and good luck with your exam. I know you'll do great." "Thank you," Ada said, the sincerity in Claire's words bolstering her confidence. As she walked through the hospital's sliding doors and into the crisp morning air, Ada felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her time with Luna and Claire had given her something she hadn't realized she was missing, a reminder of why she'd chosen this path in the first place. Law wasn't just about rules and regulations, it was about people, about making a difference in lives that others might overlook. Ada's thoughts lingered on Carson as she made her way back home. Learning about his connection to Luna had only deepened her admiration for him. He wasn't just a name on the door of a prestigious law firm, he was someone who understood the weight of compassion and the importance of standing by others. Her phone buzzed as she approached her apartment. It was an email from Boston University confirming the details of her makeup exam. It was set for 2 days from now, giving her just enough time to prepare. She exhaled deeply, the pressure returning, but not as overwhelming as before. She was ready to face this challenge, not just for herself, but for the people who believed in her: Mia, Luna, Claire, and even Carson. As she unlocked the door to her apartment, she felt a spark of determination light within her. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in days, Ada felt like she wasn't walking it alone. With her notes spread across the table and her resolve firm, she sat down to study, knowing that every decision she had made so far had brought her closer to this moment. Ada walked into the examination hall 2 days later, her heart pounding in a steady rhythm. The familiar rows of desks and the faint scent of freshly printed test booklets filled the room, but today they felt different. This wasn't just another exam, it was a second chance, one she wasn't about to take lightly. She gripped the straps of her bag tightly as she found her assigned seat near the middle of the room. As she settled in, Ada glanced around. Most of the other students were focused on their notes or quietly exchanging last-minute tips. The energy in the room was tense but determined, a reflection of the stakes for everyone present. Ada pulled out her pen and placed it neatly beside the test booklet, taking a deep breath to center herself. "Remember why you're here," she whispered to herself, the words grounding her in the moment. Luna's gentle encouragement, Claire's newfound support, and Carson's unwavering faith in her flashed through her mind. Each of them had become a part of her journey, reminding her that this wasn't just about personal ambition anymore. It was about proving that the choices she'd made, even the difficult ones, were worth it. A proctor stepped to the front of the room, his voice calm but firm as he outlined the rules. "You'll have 3 hours to complete the exam. Please ensure all belongings are stored under your desks and keep your ID cards visible. No talking once the test begins." Ada slid her bag under the desk, adjusted her ID card on the corner, and waited as the proctor distributed the test booklets. The weight of the booklet in her hands felt heavier than she expected, but she shook off the nerves and flipped it open. The first question stared back at her, a dense scenario about contract law that required careful analysis. Ada let out a slow breath, steadying her thoughts. She had spent the past 2 days immersing herself in the material, and despite the pressure, she felt prepared. With her pen poised, she began to write, her mind falling into the familiar rhythm of structuring arguments and applying precedents. Time passed in a blur as Ada worked through the exam, each question pulling her deeper into the intricate web of legal principles and case studies. She felt the occasional pang of uncertainty, but instead of panicking, she pushed forward, trusting the knowledge she had fought so hard to regain over the past 2 days. Halfway through the exam, Ada paused to flex her hand, the strain of writing catching up with her. She glanced at the clock. There was still plenty of time, but she couldn't afford to lose focus. Closing her eyes for a brief moment, she inhaled deeply, allowing herself a moment to recharge before diving back into the next section. Each page she completed felt like a small victory, a step closer to reclaiming the opportunity she thought she had lost. As the clock ticked down to the final moments of the exam, Ada's concentration sharpened. She attacked the last question with the same intensity she had maintained throughout, her pen flying across the page as she outlined her arguments with precision. The scenario required her to defend a contentious position on intellectual property law, an area she had reviewed thoroughly just the night before. Confidence surged as she realized how much of her preparation was paying off. With a final flourish, Ada placed her pen down and leaned back in her chair, letting out a long, steady breath. She glanced around the room to see other students still scribbling furiously, their focus unwavering. For the first time in days, Ada felt a sense of accomplishment. Whatever the outcome, she had given it her all. "Time's up!" the proctor called, his voice echoing through the silent room. "Please stop writing and close your test booklets." Ada carefully stacked her papers and waited for the proctor to collect them. As the booklets were gathered row by row, she felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. She had faced the challenge head-on, and now all she could do was wait. Exiting the exam hall, the crisp afternoon air greeted her, a welcome change from the stifling tension of the room. She walked slowly, her steps unhurried for the first time in what felt like days. She pulled out her phone and saw a text from Mia waiting for her. "How'd it go?" "Meet me at the cafe and spill everything." Ada smiled, her chest lightening at the thought of seeing her friend. She typed back a quick reply, "On my way," and started toward the little cafe they frequented, just a few blocks away. The weight of the exam began to fade with each step, replaced by the warmth of knowing she had done her best. At the cafe, Mia was already waiting at their usual table, a steaming latte in front of her and a second cup ready for Ada. She waved enthusiastically as Ada approached. "There she is, the woman of the hour!" Mia greeted her, pulling Ada into a quick hug before they both sat down. "So?" Mia leaned forward eagerly. "How do you feel? Did you crush it?" "I think I did okay," Ada said, her tone measured but hopeful. "It was tough, but I didn't feel lost. I think I covered everything I needed to." Mia beamed, raising her cup in a mock toast. "I knew it. There's no way they can ignore you now." Ada chuckled, taking a sip of her latte. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I still have to wait for the results." "You'll pass," Mia said with unwavering confidence. "And once you do, it's full steam ahead to Reed and Associates." The mention of the firm brought Carson's card back to Ada's mind. She hadn't reached out yet, unsure of what she would even say. But as she sat there, surrounded by the warmth of the cafe and Mia's unwavering support, she realized that this was the moment to take control of her future. Later that evening, as she settled in at her desk, Ada pulled out the card and stared at it for a long moment. Finally, with steady fingers, she dialed the number embossed beneath Carson's name. The line rang twice before his familiar, composed voice answered. Carson Reed. Ada swallowed her nerves, her voice firm as she replied, "Mr. Reed, this is Ada Harper. I wanted to thank you for everything." The conversation had begun, and Ada felt the first stirrings of the path that lay ahead. Ada stepped into the towering glass building of Reed and Associates for the first time, her heart racing with both excitement and nerves. The sleek, modern lobby was bustling with activity. Attorneys in tailored suits strode purposefully, assistants juggled phone calls, and the faint hum of collaboration buzzed in the background. It was everything Ada had imagined, and more, yet the reality of being here made it all feel overwhelming. She approached the reception desk, where a poised woman in a sharp blazer greeted her with a professional smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I'm Ada Harper," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I'm here for my first day as an intern." The receptionist checked her list and nodded. "Welcome, Ms. Harper. Someone from HR will be down shortly to escort you. Please have a seat." Ada took a chair near the large windows, clutching her bag tightly in her lap. She had spent the past week preparing for this moment, picking out the perfect outfit, rehearsing her introduction, and poring over the firm's recent cases to make sure she was ready. Still, she couldn't shake the nerves that crept in as she watched the flurry of activity around her. These were the best of the best, and she was determined to prove she belonged among them. A few minutes later, a young woman with an energetic demeanor approached her. "Ada Harper, I'm Danielle from HR. Welcome to Reed & Associates. Let me take you up to your department." Ada stood, shaking Danielle's hand. "Thank you. It's great to be here." They made their way to the elevator, and Danielle chatted amiably as they ascended to the 24th floor. "You'll be working with Rebecca Lyons' team," Danielle explained. "She's one of our top senior attorneys, sharp, efficient, and tough, but you'll learn a lot from her." Ada nodded, her anticipation mingling with a touch of apprehension. She had read about Rebecca Lyons in legal journals. Her reputation as a brilliant but demanding mentor preceded her. This was both an opportunity and a challenge, and Ada knew she would have to rise to the occasion. When they reached the floor, Danielle led her to a sleek conference room, where a group of associates were already gathered. Standing at the head of the table was Rebecca Lyons herself, a striking woman in her early 40s with a commanding presence. "Ms. Harper, welcome," Rebecca said, her sharp gaze assessing Ada as she extended a hand. "We have a busy docket, so I'll get straight to the point. You're here to learn, but you're also here to contribute. I expect nothing less than your best." Ada shook Rebecca's hand firmly, meeting her gaze with confidence. "Understood. I'm ready to get started." Rebecca offered a faint nod, her expression unreadable. "Good. Let's see what you've got." As the meeting began, Ada found herself both intimidated and invigorated. The team discussed a complex case involving corporate litigation, and Ada took detailed notes, her mind racing to keep up with the rapid exchange of ideas. It was clear this was no place for hesitation or half measures. Everyone in the room was sharp, prepared, and unrelenting. Despite the pressure, Ada felt a spark of determination. This was where she wanted to be, and she was ready to prove she could hold her own. As the meeting progressed, Ada focused intently, her pen flying across the page as she jotted down notes. The discussion was intricate, revolving around a high-stakes dispute between two rival corporations. Rebecca led the meeting with a razor-sharp command, dissecting each detail with precision. The associates contributed their insights, and while Ada didn't speak up, she paid close attention, mentally piecing together the puzzle. About halfway through, Rebecca glanced in Ada's direction. "Miss Harper," she said, her tone direct but not unkind, "you've had time to review the briefing materials we sent, correct?" Ada nodded. Yes, I went through them thoroughly. Good, Rebecca said, gesturing toward a document on the table. What's your take on the arbitration clause? Does it strengthen our client's position, or is it a vulnerability? The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Ada. Her pulse quickened, but she steadied herself, recalling the hours she had spent poring over the documents. She took a deep breath before speaking. I believe the arbitration clause could be a strength depending on how we frame it, Ada began, her voice calm and measured. The language favors our client by emphasizing confidentiality, which is critical in maintaining their competitive edge. However, the clause's enforceability might be questioned due to its narrow scope. If the opposing counsel challenges that, we'll need to be prepared with precedent that justifies its validity. Rebecca's gaze lingered on her for a moment before she gave a small, approving nod. Fair analysis. We'll explore that angle further. Mr. Porter, see to it that Ms. Harper gets access to the precedent database. James Porter, one of the junior associates, smiled and gave Ada a subtle thumbs up. She felt a surge of relief and pride as the meeting continued, her confidence bolstered by Rebecca's acknowledgement. After the meeting adjourned, James approached Ada as they left the conference room. Nice job in there, he said, falling into step beside her. Rebecca doesn't hand out compliments lightly. Thanks, Ada replied, smiling. I just hope I can keep up. You'll be fine, James assured her. It's tough, but if you can survive Rebecca's team, you can handle just about anything. As they walked toward the office bullpen, Ada felt a renewed sense of determination. The pressure was intense, but she thrived on challenges. This was her chance to prove not only her skills, but also her resilience, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. Rebecca caught up with her before she reached her desk, her sharp gaze steady. One more thing, Ms. Harper, she said. I appreciate initiative. If you see something worth bringing to my attention, don't hesitate. I expect everyone on my team to think, not just follow orders. Yes, Ms. Lyons, Ada replied. I'll keep that in mind. Rebecca nodded curtly and moved on, leaving Ada with a sense of both trepidation and excitement. This wasn't just an internship, it was a proving ground, and she was determined to excel. As the day went on, Ada immersed herself in the work. She combed through case files, crafted detailed notes, and began researching the arbitration precedent Rebecca had mentioned. The hours flew by, and when she finally looked up, the office was bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. Packing up for the day, Ada felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just about surviving her first day, it was about finding her place in an environment that challenged and inspired her. As she stepped out of the building, the cool evening air hit her, and a small smile crept across her face. This was just the beginning. Ada adjusted her chair in the quiet corner of the office library, surrounded by towering shelves of legal texts and case files. The glow of her laptop screen reflected her intense focus as she scanned through pages of arbitration precedents, piecing together arguments that could bolster the firm's position in their corporate litigation case. She had been at it for hours, but the exhaustion from her first few days as an intern had yet to catch up with her. Rebecca's words from earlier echoed in her mind. I appreciate initiative. It wasn't just a challenge, it was an open door, and Ada intended to walk through it. As she cross-referenced her notes, a notification popped up on her screen. It was an email from Carson Reed. The subject line read, "Checking in." Her pulse quickened as she opened it. Ada, I've been hearing good things about your start at Reed & Associates. Keep up the excellent work. Let me know if you need anything. My door is always open. Best, Carson Reed. A small smile crept across her face. She hadn't expected Carson to follow up so soon, but his words reinforced the sense that she wasn't just another intern. He believed in her, and that belief pushed her to aim higher. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the doorframe. She looked up to see James Porter holding a coffee cup in one hand and a file in the other. "Thought you could use a pick-me-up," James said, setting the cup on the table. "You've been in here all afternoon." "Thanks," Ada replied, grateful for the gesture. "I was just finishing up some research on arbitration precedents." James raised an eyebrow, pulling out the chair across from her. "I heard about that. Rebecca's really putting you through the ringer, huh?" "It's intense," Ada admitted, "but I like it. I'm learning a lot." "Well, you're definitely making an impression," James said. "Word travels fast around here, and people are noticing. Keep it up, and you might just survive Rebecca's boot camp." Ada chuckled, taking a sip of the coffee. High praise coming from someone who's already survived it. James leaned back in his chair, his expression turning more serious. "You know, Rebecca doesn't just push for the sake of it. She sees potential, and she'll push you until you see it too. It's brutal, but it's worth it." Ada nodded, letting his words sink in. She appreciated the insight, even if it didn't make the pressure any less daunting. "Thanks for the pep talk," she said, smiling. "Anytime," James replied, standing. "Now, don't work too hard. You'll need energy for tomorrow's case review." As he left, Ada turned her attention back to her research, her determination stronger than ever. She had a lot to prove, and she wasn't about to let the opportunities slip through her fingers. As the evening deepened, Ada's focus sharpened. She sifted through pages of dense legal jargon, cross-referencing cases that echoed the nuances of their arbitration clause. Every now and then, she paused to jot down key points or organize her findings into structured arguments. The library grew quieter as her colleagues began trickling out for the night, but Ada remained rooted in her chair. She was nearly done compiling her research when she noticed a familiar name buried in one of the cases: Reed v. Hartwell, 2007. Curious, she clicked on the link and began reading. The case involved a small business owner, Michael Reed, who had successfully defended himself against a corporate giant trying to bankrupt him. As Ada read further, she realized the plaintiff was Carson's father. Her breath caught as she pieced the story together. The case wasn't just a victory for the underdog, it was the moment that likely inspired Carson to pursue his own legal career. The parallels between Michael Reed's perseverance and Carson's current success felt striking, even poetic. The realization filled Ada with a renewed respect for Carson, not just as her boss, but as someone who had walked a difficult path to get where he was. She bookmarked the case, intending to mention it during their next conversation. Not as a tactic to impress him, but as a way to show she understood the values that seemed to define Reed and Associates: integrity, resilience, and the power of standing up for what was right. The clock ticked past 9 by the time Ada finally shut her laptop. She leaned back in her chair, stretching her sore muscles and letting out a satisfied sigh. Her research was thorough, her arguments solid, and she felt ready to present her findings in tomorrow's case review. More importantly, she felt connected to the work on a level she hadn't experienced before. It wasn't just about proving herself anymore. It was about aligning her principles with the firm's mission. As she packed up her things and headed toward the elevator, the quiet hum of the building felt almost comforting. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of her first day, and she welcomed the sense of calm that came with knowing she had made progress. Stepping outside, the cool night air greeted her, carrying with it the distant sounds of the city. Ada glanced up at the towering building behind her, its illuminated logo a beacon against the dark sky. She felt a sense of pride, not just for making it through another day, but for carving out a space where she could truly grow. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from Claire. Aunt Luna's asking about you again. Stop by soon if you can. Ada smiled as she typed her reply. I'll visit this weekend. Tell her I'm thinking of her. As she walked toward the subway, her mind buzzed with possibilities. She wasn't just surviving at Reed and Associates, she was thriving. And with every small step forward, she felt herself moving closer to the person she wanted to become. The conference room was filled with a tense energy as Rebecca Lyons gathered her team for the scheduled case review. Ada sat near the end of the long, polished table, her notebook open and pen ready. The room buzzed with low murmurs as associates exchanged notes and prepped their talking points. Ada had been reviewing her research all morning, replaying the key arguments in her mind like a mantra. Rebecca entered the room with her usual commanding presence, silencing the chatter instantly. Let's get started, she said, taking her seat at the head of the table. This arbitration case is gaining traction, and the opposing counsel is pushing hard to dismantle our position. I want every possible angle covered. She turned her sharp gaze to Ada. Ms. Harper, you've been working on the arbitration clause. Share what you've found. Ada straightened in her chair, her heart pounding but her voice steady. The arbitration clause has strengths that we can leverage, particularly its confidentiality provision, which is favorable to our client. However, the clause's enforceability could be challenged due to its narrow scope. I've identified precedents where similar clauses have held up in court, provided we frame the narrative to highlight the fairness and mutual benefit of the agreement. Rebecca nodded, her expression neutral but attentive. Go on. Ada continued, referencing the case she had discovered, Reed v. Hartwell, 2007. This case underscores how an arbitration clause, even under scrutiny, can serve as a shield for smaller entities facing pressure from larger corporations. The parallels to our situation are striking and could strengthen our argument. The mention of the case seemed to catch Rebecca's attention. She tilted her head slightly, her lips curving into a faint smile. Interesting choice, Ms. Harper. I see you've done your homework. Encouraged, Ada pressed on, outlining her proposed strategy for countering potential challenges from the opposing counsel. As she spoke, she noticed a few of the senior associates nodding subtly, a sign that her analysis was resonating. When she finished, Rebecca leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled. Solid work, she said finally. We'll incorporate your findings into our argument. Mr. Porter, make sure the relevant documents are distributed to the team. James nodded, shooting Ada an approving glance. She felt a surge of relief and pride. Earning Rebecca's approval was no small feat, and it validated the effort she had poured into her research. The meeting moved on, with other associates presenting their updates. Ada listened carefully, taking notes and chiming in when prompted. By the time the meeting concluded, she felt a renewed sense of belonging, a feeling that she was no longer just an observer, but an active contributor to the team. As the room emptied, Rebecca approached Ada, her sharp gaze softening slightly. Good work today, she said, but don't get too comfortable. There's always more to learn. Ada nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. Thank you. I'll keep that in mind. See that you do, Rebecca replied before walking away, leaving Ada with a sense of accomplishment and anticipation for what lay ahead. As Ada gathered her things, James caught up to her in the hallway, his usual easygoing demeanor tempered with a hint of admiration. You really nailed it in there, he said, falling into step beside her. Rebecca doesn't hand out compliments lightly. Thanks, Ada replied, her smile modest but genuine. I just wanted to make sure I contributed something meaningful. Well, you did more than that, James said. Referencing Reed v. Hartwell, that was a bold move and it paid off. I think you impressed more than just Rebecca today. Ada chuckled softly, grateful for the encouragement. I was just trying to connect the dots. The case seemed relevant. "Relevant is an understatement," James said. "I mean, that case practically shaped the firm's ethos. Carson must have noticed when you brought it up." Ada paused at the mention of Carson, her thoughts drifting to the connection between him and the case. She hadn't intended to leverage it, but the parallels had been too significant to ignore. Still, she wondered if her choice would come across as calculated rather than insightful. "You think he noticed?" she asked cautiously. James shrugged, a knowing smile on his face. "Carson notices everything, especially when it comes to something as personal as that case. But in a good way. Trust me." They walked together toward the office bullpen, where the atmosphere was buzzing with energy. Ada's confidence from the meeting hadn't fully settled yet, but she found herself energized by the thought of what came next. She was starting to find her footing, even in an environment as high pressure as this. Later that afternoon, as Ada was working at her desk, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Claire. "Aunt Luna wants to know if you'll come by this weekend. She won't stop talking about how proud she is of you." Ada smiled as she typed out a quick reply. "I'll definitely visit. Thanks for letting me know." The message reminded her of the deeper connections she was building, not just at the firm, but with people like Luna and Claire, who had become unexpected but meaningful parts of her journey. Just as she set her phone down, an email notification popped up on her screen. It was from Carson, the subject line simple. "Nice work today." Ada opened it, her heart fluttering slightly as she read, "Your presentation in the case review was sharp. Keep that momentum going. Let me know if you need anything." She leaned back in her chair, the weight of his words sinking in. Carson's validation was more than just a compliment. It was a reminder of how far she'd come and how much further she could go. By the time the day wound to a close, Ada felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges ahead were daunting, but she was no longer the uncertain intern she had been just days ago. With each step, she was proving not just to others, but to herself, that she had what it took to thrive in this world. And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. The tension in the conference room was palpable as Rebecca gathered the team for an emergency briefing. Overnight, new developments in the arbitration case had come to light. The opposing counsel had uncovered a clause buried deep in the original contract that threatened to undermine Reed and Associates' strategy. Rebecca's expression was sharper than usual, her gaze slicing through the room as she outlined the situation. "They're arguing that the arbitration clause was crafted in bad faith," Rebecca said, her tone clipped. "If they succeed, not only do we lose the case, but it sets a precedent that could damage our client's reputation. And ours." Ada sat at the far end of the table, her notebook open and pen poised. She listened intently as Rebecca broke down the implications, her mind already racing through possible counter-arguments. The team began to discuss potential responses, but the mood in the room was heavy. The stakes were higher than ever. As Rebecca paused to review a set of documents, James leaned toward Ada and whispered, "This is bad. If we can't find a way to flip this, we're sunk." Ada nodded slightly, her own concerns mirrored in his words. She knew how critical this case was, not just for the client, but for the firm's standing in the legal community. Her earlier confidence wavered as the gravity of the situation sank in. Then Rebecca's gaze landed squarely on Ada. "Ms. Harper," she said, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. "You've been studying this clause for weeks. What's your take on their argument?" Ada's heart skipped a beat. All eyes turned to her, and the room fell silent. She took a steadying breath, forcing herself to focus on the facts. "They're framing the clause as overly restrictive," Ada began, her voice measured. "But we can counter by emphasizing that both parties agreed to its terms during negotiations. The language, while specific, is not inherently unfair. Additionally, we have precedents where similar clauses were upheld because they prioritized efficiency and reduced litigation costs. Rebecca's sharp gaze didn't waver. And what about their claim that it was crafted in bad faith? That's where we'll need to dig deeper, Ada admitted. If we can show evidence of transparency during the drafting process, emails, meeting notes, anything, it could dismantle their argument. It's a risky play, but it could shift the narrative back in our favor. Rebecca regarded her for a moment before nodding curtly. Good. Start combing through the records. I want every scrap of communication between the parties that supports this argument. We don't have time to waste. Ada nodded, adrenaline surging as she jotted down Rebecca's instructions. As the meeting continued, she felt a flicker of determination. The situation was dire, but this was her chance to make a tangible impact, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. The hours that followed were a blur of activity. Ada returned to her desk and immediately began sifting through the troves of emails, meeting notes and memos from the case files. The pressure was immense, but her focus was razor-sharp. Every line she read, every document she scanned, was another step closer to finding the piece of evidence that could turn the tide. As the minutes turned into hours, the office began to thin out. Many of her colleagues had gone home, but Ada stayed, her desk illuminated by the soft glow of her computer screen. James stopped by with a cup of coffee, setting it down beside her with a knowing smile. "Still at it?" he asked, leaning against her desk. Ada nodded, barely looking up. "If we don't find something to counter their claim, this case is over. I'm not letting that happen." James chuckled softly. "You're relentless. Rebecca's going to love that, eventually." Ada smiled faintly, appreciating his support, but her focus didn't waver. "Thanks for the coffee," she said, taking a quick sip before diving back into the files. It wasn't until nearly midnight that Ada stumbled upon a document that made her pause. It was an internal memo from early in the negotiations, detailing a meeting between the client's legal team and the opposing party. The language was clear and explicit. Both sides had reviewed the arbitration clause in detail and agreed to its terms. Even better, the memo included a signed acknowledgement from the opposing counsel confirming their approval. Ada's heart raced as she reread the document, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. This was it, the evidence they needed to dismantle the bad faith argument. She quickly flagged the file and began drafting a summary for Rebecca, her fingers flying across the keyboard. As she worked, the weight of the day began to lift. The hours of meticulous research, the pressure of high expectations, it all felt worth it now. By the time she finished her summary and sent it to Rebecca, it was nearly 2 a.m. Ada leaned back in her chair, letting out a long, steady breath. She was exhausted, but exhilarated. Just as she was about to pack up for the night, her phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from Rebecca. "Good find, Harper. Meet me in the conference room first thing tomorrow to go over how we'll present this." Ada stared at the message, a small smile tugging at her lips. Rebecca's approval was rare and hard-earned, and it filled her with a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in a long time. As she stepped out into the cool night air, the city seemed quieter than usual, as if reflecting her own sense of calm. For the first time since starting at Reed & Associates, Ada felt not just like an intern, but like an integral part of the team. She knew the battle wasn't over, but with this breakthrough, they finally had a fighting chance, and she was ready for whatever came next. The next morning, Ada arrived at the office earlier than usual, her nerves buzzing with anticipation. She headed straight to the conference room, carrying a neatly prepared folder containing the memo she had uncovered and her summary of how it could be used to counter the opposing counsel's argument. The building was still quiet, the usual hustle yet to start, and the stillness felt both calming and ominous. Rebecca was already there when Ada walked in, standing at the head of the table with her arms crossed. She glanced up as Ada entered, her sharp eyes betraying a hint of approval. "Good, you're here," Rebecca said, motioning for Ada to sit. "Let's go over your findings." Ada handed her the folder and began walking Rebecca through her analysis, her voice steady despite the undercurrent of nerves. She detailed how the memo not only demonstrated mutual agreement on the arbitration clause, but also undermined the bad faith claim entirely. The key, Ada explained, would be to frame the evidence in a way that highlighted the transparency of the negotiations, casting doubt on the opposing counsel's credibility. Rebecca nodded occasionally as she listened, flipping through the pages with a critical eye. When Ada finished, there was a moment of silence as Rebecca set the folder down and leaned back in her chair. "This is solid work, Harper," Rebecca said finally. "It's exactly what we needed. The memo is our best shot at turning this around, but presenting it effectively will be just as important as the evidence itself." Ada's heart swelled with a mix of pride and relief. "I can prepare additional supporting materials if needed," she offered. "Do that," Rebecca replied, "and I want you in the room when we present this to the client. You found this. You deserve to be part of the discussion." The words caught Ada off guard. She hadn't expected to be included in such a high-stakes meeting, but the opportunity thrilled her. "Thank you," she said, her voice firm. "I won't let you down." Rebecca gave a faint smile. "See that you don't." The rest of the day was a whirlwind. Ada worked closely with James and another associate to finalize the materials for the client presentation. The team buzzed with energy, their shared determination palpable as they refined every detail. Ada's role was smaller than the senior associates, but she felt like an integral part of the process, her research and insights woven into the strategy they were building. By the time they entered the client's boardroom that afternoon, Ada's nerves had settled into a calm resolve. The client's legal team sat at the far end of the table, their expressions tense but attentive as Rebecca began laying out the firm's strategy. Ada listened closely, ready to contribute if called upon, but content to let Rebecca steer the conversation. When the moment came to present the memo, Rebecca glanced at Ada and gave a subtle nod. Taking the cue, Ada confidently explained the document's significance, her voice clear and precise. The client's legal team exchanged murmurs, their tension easing as they began to grasp the strength of their position. As the meeting concluded, the client stood and shook Rebecca's hand, their gratitude evident. "This changes everything," they said. "Thank you." Rebecca turned to Ada, her expression inscrutable but her eyes sharp with approval. "Good work," she said simply, then motioned for the team to follow her out. For Ada, the words were enough. As the team walked back to the office, the sense of accomplishment was palpable. Ada kept her pace steady, staying at the back of the group, but her mind raced with a mix of pride and disbelief. She had stepped into the client's boardroom as an intern, unsure of her place, and walked out knowing her contributions had made a tangible difference. Back at the office, Rebecca called the team into her office for a quick debrief. The mood was lighter than usual, a rare moment of collective satisfaction after the grueling hours they had poured into the case. Rebecca stood by her desk, addressing the group with her usual no-nonsense tone. "We're not out of the woods yet," Rebecca began, her gaze sweeping over the team. "The opposing counsel won't take this lying down, but we've given our client a strong position to stand on. That's what we do here. Deliver results." Her eyes lingered on Ada for a fraction of a second longer than anyone else's. "Well done, everyone. Let's keep this momentum going." The team dispersed, but Rebecca gestured for Ada to stay behind. Closing the office door, Rebecca leaned against her desk, her sharp demeanor softening slightly. "I wanted to tell you personally. Your work on this case didn't go unnoticed, Rebecca said. It's rare for an intern to contribute at this level, and you exceeded expectations. Keep it up, and you'll go far. Thank you, Ada said, her voice steady despite the thrill of hearing Rebecca's praise. I've learned so much from this experience, and I'm ready to keep proving myself. Rebecca gave a small nod, a faint smile flickering across her lips. Good. I like that attitude. As Ada left Rebecca's office, she felt a wave of relief and excitement. The hours of hard work, the late nights, the pressure, it had all been worth it. Her confidence had grown, and she felt more certain than ever that she belonged here, among some of the best in the field. That evening, as she packed up her desk, her phone buzzed with a message from Claire. Aunt Luna would love to see you this weekend if you have time. She keeps asking about your work. She's so proud. Ada smiled, her chest tightening with a mix of affection and gratitude. She texted back, I'll be there. Can't wait to see you both. Walking out of the office into the cool evening air, Ada reflected on how far she had come. From the uncertainty of missing her exam to the whirlwind of joining Reed and Associates, her journey had been anything but predictable. Yet every step, no matter how challenging, had brought her closer to the person she wanted to become. As she made her way home, she felt the quiet certainty that she was on the right path. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now she allowed herself to savor this moment, a moment of triumph earned through hard work, resilience, and the unwavering belief that she could rise to meet whatever lay ahead. The weekend arrived with a sense of calm Ada hadn't felt in weeks. She stood outside Luna's modest home, a small bouquet of bright flowers in hand. The house was charming and unassuming, much like Luna herself, nestled on a quiet street lined with trees just beginning to show the green buds of spring. Ada took a deep breath before knocking on the door. Claire answered almost immediately, her usual guarded demeanor replaced by a warm smile. Ada, you made it, she said, stepping aside to let her in. She's been talking about you non-stop. Ada chuckled, stepping into the cozy home. I wouldn't miss it. How is she? Better every day, Claire replied, leading Ada into the living room. She's in there, probably pretending to read. Ada found Luna sitting in an armchair by the window, a book resting unopened on her lap. She looked up as Ada entered, her face lighting up with a smile that made her seem years younger. Ada, my dear, Luna said warmly, motioning for her to come closer. You didn't have to bring flowers, but they're beautiful. Thank you. It's the least I could do, Ada replied, placing the bouquet in a vase Claire had brought over. How are you feeling? Stronger, Luna said, patting the arm of her chair, and happier now that you're here. Come, sit. Tell me about work. Ada pulled up a chair and began recounting the past week, the high-stakes case, the long hours, and the breakthroughs that had kept her going. Luna listened intently, her eyes twinkling with pride and curiosity. You've found your place, Luna said when Ada finished. I knew you would. You have the determination and the heart for this kind of work. It hasn't been easy, Ada admitted, but it's been worth it, and a lot of that is because of you. Luna tilted her head, her smile softening. Because of me? Ada nodded. Meeting you reminded me why I wanted to do this in the first place. It's about more than just cases or winning. It's about helping people, making a difference. That's what you've done for so many, including me. Luna reached for Ada's hand, her grip firm despite her frailty. You've already made a difference, Ada, and you'll continue to, as long as you stay true to yourself. Claire, who had been quietly listening from the corner of the room, spoke up. She's right, you know. You've got something special, something this world needs more of. Ada smiled, her heart full as she looked between the two women. They had become more than acquaintances through a chance meeting. They were part of her story now, shaping the person she was becoming. The conversation flowed easily after that, filled with stories, laughter, and moments of reflection. As the afternoon turned to evening, Ada felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for the opportunities she'd been given, but for the people who had come into her life when she needed them most. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the living room in a warm, golden light, Ada rose from her seat. "I should get going," she said reluctantly, glancing at her watch. "Thank you for letting me visit. This has been exactly what I needed." Luna smiled, reaching for Ada's hand one last time. "The door is always open for you, dear, and remember, you have a gift. Use it wisely." "I will," Ada promised, her voice steady with conviction. "Thank you for everything." Claire walked her to the door, a rare softness in her tone. "I meant what I said earlier, Ada. You're going to go far, but don't forget to take care of yourself along the way." Ada nodded, smiling. "I'll try." As she stepped outside into the crisp evening air, Ada felt an unshakable sense of clarity. Her journey so far had been full of unexpected twists, but every step had led her closer to the person she wanted to be. The lessons she'd learned from Luna, the challenges at Reed and Associates, and even the moments of doubt, they all felt like threads woven into a larger, stronger tapestry. The following week at Reed and Associates, Ada's hard work continued to pay off. The team's strategy in the arbitration case had not only turned the tide, but had also earned the firm a decisive victory. The client was thrilled, and Rebecca had taken a moment during a team debrief to single out Ada's contributions, a rare but meaningful acknowledgement of her value to the team. It wasn't long after that Carson Reed called her into his office. Ada walked in, her nerves humming as she took a seat across from him. His office was a reflection of his personality, modern yet understated, with walls lined with books and framed accolades. "I wanted to talk to you about your future here," Carson began, his tone as composed as ever but carrying an edge of warmth. "You've shown remarkable initiative and skill over the past few weeks. It's not often we see an intern rise to the level of responsibility you've taken on." "Thank you," Ada said, her voice steady but humble. "It's been an incredible learning experience." Carson nodded. "And you've made the most of it. I'd like to offer you a permanent position at the firm. It's clear you have the talent and drive to excel here." Ada's breath caught for a moment as the words sank in. This was the opportunity she had dreamed of, the culmination of all her hard work and perseverance. "I don't know what to say," she managed, her voice tinged with emotion. "Thank you for believing in me." "You've earned it," Carson said simply. "And I have no doubt you'll continue to prove that." As she left Carson's office, the weight of his words settled over her, bringing with it a profound sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the beginning of something far greater. That evening, Ada sat at her desk in her small apartment, a quiet moment of reflection settling over her. She thought about Luna, Claire, Rebecca, and Carson. Each of them had played a role in shaping her journey. But more than anything, she thought about the decisions she had made, the risks she had taken, and the strength she had found within herself. Her path had been anything but predictable. But as she looked ahead, she knew she was ready for whatever came next. With her future at Reed and Associates secured and a renewed sense of purpose guiding her, Ada Harper was exactly where she was meant to be.